Ruby Amethyst has fallen and it is no longer the best deck of the format. Welcome to set 4, guys. Let's go ahead and rank some decks. So what's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys for watching. Consider hitting that like, subscribe, and comment down below. All that good stuff helps us out. Also, we have a Patreon with monthly giveaways, fun stuff, information down below. But we are here to talk about some decks. I have 25 decks to talk about today. We're going to put them as Tier 1, Tier 2, Rogue, or Fun, and a brief introduction on what these are. Tier 1 decks are the decks you expect to see winning and doing the best across the board. Tier 2 are decks that you're not surprised when they win or top, but they're not at the same level as Tier 1. Rogue decks are, on the right day, they can win an event, especially a bigger event. However, they're going to top, and they're going to get a few tops. And then your Fun decks are decks that maybe they don't top, maybe they get 1 or 2 tops here or there. But anyway, that's kind of where we're at. So without further ado, we're starting this off with Amethyst Steel Control. Where do I think Amethyst Steel Control goes? I don't think they necessarily use a whole lot more of the new cards from Ursula's Return other than Ursula. I do like the 2 and the 7 drops in this deck. Like 3 of the 7 drop, 4 of the 2. I do really like the 1-3 Challenger. I know they already had Prince Eric in Steel, which does the same exact thing, but Ursula allowing that shift potential is actually kind of nice, so I think it kind of worked its way into the deck that way. Then we have Amethyst Emerald Hyper Aggro. Where do I want to put Amethyst Emerald Hyper Aggro? I think this deck is actually sneaky good. Probably one of the better aggro decks, but it's still an aggro deck, and I don't know if we're quite in the best place for them yet. I don't know if we'll truly ever be in a format where aggro is like super popular, because there's just a lot of hard counters out there. But I do think Hyper Aggro is in a pretty decent spot right now, given the top couple decks. Emerald Steel Shift Control. So again, this deck didn't get too many crazy new tools, just kind of some neat cards. The aerial is actually pretty good too. I just uploaded my version of this deck, playing a couple aerials, some of the new songs, things like that. So turn 3 Beast is always pretty cool, pretty good, pretty strong. I'm going to put this as another rogue deck. Out of the Emerald Steel variants that you're going to see, I do think it's on the weaker side of them. However, it's still a deck that can absolutely see some success. A deck that has been so much fun, and this deck got a lot of new support, from Brooms to some Mickeys to Bruno Madrigal being able to just call Magic Broom, and if you hit it, you get 3 lore. Most of the time, you're going to be playing over 20 Brooms in your deck, so there's a really good chance that you can go ahead and just keep getting 3 lore off of your Bruno, and if you have 2 of them, it just adds up so quickly. And on the off chance then, if you miss, well, you know it's there, so then the other one can be right every single time. I actually think Brooms is more than a fun deck. I think this deck's going to have more than 1 or 2 tops. I think it's going to be a popular-ish-esque deck. It's not going to be like Tier 1 popular, even like mid-Tier 2 popular, but it might be more popular than some of the Tier 2 decks. And I do think it's going to see a decent bit of a success, so we're going to put it as a rogue deck. Speaking on Bruno and Isabella and Camila and all of them, Mirabelle, Casa Madrigal. It's a fun deck. It's neat. I like that the movie can basically support an entire deck on its own, but it's not going to see a whole lot of success if we're being honest about it. Purple Steel. I know I say Amethyst, I say Purple, I say all kinds of stuff. Purple Steel Hyper Aggro. I do think it's weaker than Emerald Amethyst Hyper Aggro, but I do think it's still another rogue deck that I expect to see a couple tops here or there. Maybe it tips more towards the fun category, but I am going to leave it in rogue. I'm going to have a handful of aggro in rogue because one of these aggro decks is going to absolutely be like high rogue. It's just a matter of which one grabs the mantle and becomes that deck. We said it's not the best deck anymore. Just how far has Ruby Amethyst fallen? It got some new tools. It got goofy. It got Sisu potentially. It does have new cards, and I think it has some neat interaction. I'm putting it down in tier 2 though. I do think this deck is going to see a bit of a decline. It already started to see a little bit of its pie get taken last format, and I think other decks are just catching up to it even more. And for that reason, it's going to be in our tier 2 category. Where do we want to put Ruby Steel, Control, Pirate, Location, whatever we want to call it? I'm going to put them... I do think they're better than Fun, but maybe they still stay there. I'm going to put them in Rogue. I want to see them fall off before I put them down to Fun. I think they're near bottom Rogue, though. I do think it's still a decent deck. I don't think it's going to see very much representation, because unlike something like Brooms, it just doesn't have that grab to it where people are going to go and play it in droves. Talking about new cards from Ice Block, which just enables the -1 being really nice with the 3-cost Sisu even. It helps out with your Madame Medusa, because now you can -1 on a 4-attack character and hit it with your Madame Medusa to get rid of it that way. Shift into Sisu for a board wipe. I think that the Ice Block Control, the red-blue deck, is very, very strong moving forward. It was my deck pick for being the best deck into set championships of the first time. It ended up being top 3. It performed pretty well. I wasn't too disappointed with my predictions. And once again, we're putting it up there again. It's going to be in that top tier category. I absolutely expect to play this deck and to see it. I do think some of the new cards too, it answers aggro a little bit better than it had previously, especially with that turn 3 Sisu being able to get rid of a lot of those aggressive cards, because they usually only have 1 attack, such as, well, Curse Merfolk is 0, but Flynn Riders and Pinocchios and Maleficents and Lilos and all these hyper aggro cards just get absolutely answered by that without even needing to be challenged or readied. Amber Ruby Songs. Amber Ruby Songs. Where do I think this deck goes? I did do a video on this deck too. If you guys are interested, go check that out. I absolutely think it is a tier 2 deck. I think this deck is actually a lot of fun. You can sing Be Prepared on turn, what is it? Turn 5. Yeah, turn 5 very consistently. Sometimes you can sing it even earlier depending on your exact build. But the Bee King Undisputed, that card is so good. And Ariel being able to search them out, and then they still have things like Teeth and Ambition, your Bare Necessities. Like, there's a handful of songs that actually makes this deck pretty strong. Lemon Lime Discard. This deck has been hyped a ton. I've seen a bunch of content creators saying, is this the best deck? Is this the deck to beat? It is not. I'm going to put it in Rogue. I don't think it's a top 10 deck either. I think it's got some nice interactions. It's got some niche scenarios. I think it's got a lot of toolbox. Whether you're going the Kita line to singing Under the Sea on turn 4 or turn 3, turn 4. I think it's got a lot good going for it, but there's at least 2 better discard decks if that's what you're into, is discard. And I just think it's hyped up so much that maybe it's just me, but I think it's falling flat, and I don't see it being as good as people are saying. Good old Phil. Training our heroes. Phil. Only just, unicolor here, not because it's a steel deck, but just because there's so many different ways you can pair up Phil in a deck. But a hero-based strategy around Phil, I think they're all going to be fun, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some of them top. I know some Steel Songs also are teching Phil in. To me, that's not necessarily a hero deck. It's Steel Song with Phil. So we're going to keep that on the Steel Song category. How it kind of like whether you're playing Pride Lands, Lantern, your flutes. Like Phil's just another option in that category. But I think like hero based decks around Phil are going to be fun. I think people are going to experiment with them, and I expect to see at least one or two different versions of it topping at some point. Amethyst Emerald discard. I was actually testing this deck a bunch. I got a video I'm working on. This deck's crazy. Like there's so much advantage to be held. And my build is definitely tipped into the evasive. It's like an evasive discard, and it is, this deck is, the advantage that it enables is just crazy. Obviously something like Grab Your Swords is going to be the biggest counter to it, but you have things like your Ursula Deceiver to be able to take that down, and you have ways to bounce her back to replay her. So I mean, it's not like you just lose to Steel Song. Like that's just a common misconception. And a lot of time too, like against Steel Song, sometimes you skip your 1 or 2 drop and get into where you're tutoring past, where they're just going to let the Storm Rage on or Strength of the Raging Fire you, and get to where you could see their hand and rip those cards out of their hand, and then all of a sudden you drop like 2 or 3 1-drops on turn 3 or 4, and like you spam them out later. You don't put them out just one turn to be picked off one turn after another. Play it a little bit smarter, but I really like Blue Fairy in this deck too. I put her in, and like you set her up and Bucky up, and all of a sudden you just start dropping things like your Diablo, who's a 3-cost Floodborn, and all of a sudden you're drawing cards off Diablo. Well, because of your Blue Fairy, when you play Diablo, your opponent's discarding cards, and then once your Diablo is exerted, you're drawing even more cards. The deck is just really, really good, and I think it's absolutely going to be a top-tier threat. We have a special guest joining us as we finish off our tier list. Do you want to say anything? No?
My tongue hurts.
Your tongue hurts?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I will be right back to finish this off, guys, but you won't miss a beat. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, we fixed her tongue, and moving on with the tier list. She's actually in the bedroom watching Snow White. Did you know that movie came out in 1937? That movie is old. But anyway, Amethyst Emerald Tempo Control. Where do I think Tempo Control goes? I think the discard version is actually better, which is funny because last format I was saying how much that the Tempo version was better. I just feel like Tempo didn't really advance itself too much. Ursula's great, Diablo's great, but for what they offer, they just kind of do similar. Well, I guess Ursula doesn't, but like Diablo does similar things already, because the deck draws so much already that personally in like Tempo Control, I think Diablo is like a 2 or 3 of max. But Ursula is a pretty nice card too for it, just that top end. But by the time you get to her, sometimes the damage is already done. Obviously, you have so many ways to shift. You can play the Challenger, but you don't need to because you have the discard Ursula. You have the Singing Ursula. Just be careful because she does affect both players. So like, if you try and drop her on board and sing your friends with the 3-cost Ursula, you can't, because other characters can't exert to sing songs. So do note that hits other characters, not opponents' characters. Jafar Wheel. Admittedly, I need to mess around with this deck more post Ursula. For right now, I'm gonna put it. Where do I want to put it? I'm gonna put it at the top of Rogue. I think this is probably the most likely to prove me wrong deck. I could absolutely see it moving up into tier 2. I'm gonna leave it at Rogue, but I definitely think that out of every deck here, especially in the Rogue category, it's probably most likely to move up. Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro. Where do we want to put Hyper Aggro? We're gonna go Rogue. Like I said, there's gonna be a lot of aggro decks in Rogue. I still do think Amethyst Emerald is probably the best aggro deck, so do note that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Steel or Amber can't move up and take that crown. But yeah, so we're gonna have a handful of aggro decks in that Rogue category. Sapphire Steel, wheel ramp, resist, whatever you want to tip it into. You got your Cogsworth, your whole new worlds, like the same thing we've been doing, but they did get some new toys like the Scuttle being able to grab an item early on turn 2, like because the deck really didn't have the greatest turn 2. I mean, as opposed to red blue that really lacked. I'm gonna put it tier 2, by the way. Red blue, like with Scuttle, is really helpful because the deck didn't necessarily have a strong turn 2 play. This deck does have the Captain Hook, Smee, 1-2 punch play line. So I mean, it had some. Otherwise, you just like sing or not sing. You hard play your one jump ahead, which is less common in this deck though too. I think Scuttle's a really nice addition to the deck. It got a couple other neat tools. The statues, I don't know. Using your discard for your Inkwell is great, but it's a little slow. But we'll see how the format plays out. I could see it being a pretty strong 2 of potentially, kind of just sticking around in those decks. Blurple. Where are we going to put Blurple? It got Ursula. That's a really big top end threat. I mean, Elsa's still pretty good too. So now it's got a couple really good top end threats. If you get that ramp going early, I think Blurple can do a lot of really strong things. I'm super excited to bring an updated list to you guys on the channel once I get more gameplay and get that all recorded for you. But I'm going to put it in tier 2. I think it's such a fun deck to play and surprises people, and no one seems to ever be ready for it. But I really, really like Blurple as a deck. Lemon Lime Aggro. Lemon Lime Aggro. Well, we're going to put it in Rogue because that's where all the aggro decks are, right? I'm going to put it in Fun. I think so far out of the 4 aggro decks, it's the worst one. It can play a lot of Song Hate. I mean, that's going good for it. But I feel like it's the least, like it's the worst one at trying to claw back if your opponent gets a good board state present. Like Steel, you can have obviously your Steel engine. Amethyst, which is present in all of the other ones, has things like Fox. And I don't think this color combination possesses the tools it needs to claw back when it inevitably needs to claw back. Steel Song. Where do we put Steel Song? Kind of like Ruby Amethyst. I think it's dropping down a little bit. However, I think it's still going to be a really strong deck. It got the Aerial, the 6 cost, which is just crazy. Her 8 willpower. Dealing the extra damage is pretty nice too. You can shift over the 5 Singer if you want to. Not saying it's necessarily ideal, but there's times where it's definitely worth it and it will come up. I do think Steel Song's really good. I think it's going to take a little bit though to figure out and get optimized. So for the first couple weeks, don't be surprised if Steel Song seems like, why isn't this deck doing anything? And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's like, hey, Steel Song is still a deck. Don't forget about it. Ruby Emerald Evasive. This kind of emerged as an anti-meta choice, and now it has things like the Pegasus cards, which are really crazy. It has your Diablo, which is really strong. I think it's moving on up. It's no longer just like an anti-meta deck. I think it's a tier 2 deck. I think this deck is actually sneaky good, and if you can't deal with a lot of evasives, you're in for a rough time. Kind of like the evasive discard deck I was talking about. Like, that's what I've been doing against people on Pixelborn, is just like overwhelming them with the evasives, while at the same time, like as I'm playing these evasives, like the Diablo and the Pegasus, I'm making you discard cards. So I'm attacking your hand while you can't even deal with my board. So it prevents you from like getting your ink count up high enough for like a be prepared, things like that. So it really just works so well, especially with all the drawing I get to do in the process. And keep in mind too, like if you say have your Bucky and like Flynn Rider, because I'm playing the 2-drop Flynn Rider, no Curse Merfolk, better allocated to other uninkables, but like Flynn Rider, right? Like you have Flynn Rider, you have your Bucky, you have like little Pegasus. You can shift into big Pegasus. Your opponent now has to discard because you played a Floodborn, and he also grants evasive till next turn for your Bucky, for your Flynn. So now you can freely quest with these cards, and your opponent can't even do anything with it unless they have evasive or effect damage. Like, evasives just are actually pretty strong. So I could see something like Steel decks just it's like if you're not playing like Emerald or like a discard version, you pretty much have to play Steel. And obviously, there's Emerald Steel discard, which we didn't get to yet. But I just think that the format's going to be really interesting because at the same time, you still have Ruby Amethyst that obviously has neither of those things going for it. It's not discard, nor is it Steel. Your red blue isn't discard, nor it's Steel. So I think it's just going to be a really fun format. I'm excited for a lot of it. Uh, Emerald Steel Aggro. Where do we want to put Emerald Steel Aggro? Kind of like Amber Emerald. I'm going to put it down in fun. It does have the Steel engine, so it can deal with boards a little bit better, but it lacks that turn one. Just, I mean, I guess, there's not a ton of turn one multi-questers, but like, I don't know. I just feel like if you're playing Emerald Steel, it's probably not an aggro version. You're probably playing discard or shift or some other type of homebrew. And if you're playing aggro, you're probably playing a different aggro deck. For that reason, I'm going to put it in our fun category. Mufasa, another one of those decks that gets to take advantage of the new Sisu card. She's just really crazy. You have the Beast who enters with 4 damage. You have Mulan who comes in with 2, kind of doing that Mother Gothel-like effect for your Rapunzel. Rapunzel just being really, really crazy too. I'm going to put it down here in Rogue. Do I think the Rogue is actually in order how I'd do it? Jafar, discard Mufasa. Maybe I do. I actually think that Rogue turned out pretty good. I got it pretty well ordered, I think. Let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how these look as far as best decks being left to right, other than fun. Fun decks are all fun. Tiana Aggro. Again, kind of like Hero, I left this unicolored. I'm going to put it in fun. I could see Tiana Aggro topping, but I really don't see it topping more than like 1 or 2 times in the format. For that reason, I am going to put it down in the fun, and maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe this deck will just pop off and do really, really well and be Rogue, Tier 2, something. I don't know. I don't think so, though. I'm going to leave it as fun. I left it here, though, because like I personally have played like Purple Tiana, I've played Amber Tiana, Emerald Tiana. Like I think you could play Tiana Aggro in quite a few different facets, and that's why we're going to put her down as just like a unicolor, kind of like Hero here. It's more or less the concept of the deck and less about the actual deck itself. Last and certainly not least, Emerald Steel Discard. The deck that came on so strong towards the end of last format, really challenged for that absolute best deck of the format spot, and personally, it's my pick to be the best deck of this format too. It has a much more reliable draw engine now in Diablo. So it's kind of forcing you to, do something about that. Bucky and Prince John teaming back up again for this because, again, Diablo is a turn 3. It can run things like the Pegasuses, which, a shift 3 evasive multi-quester grants everything evasive. And it's just another one of those shift 3 Floodborns. Like, I think this deck is really, really good. And I think it's going to be the clear best deck of the format. Kind of like Ruby Amethyst was the last 2 formats. I'm not saying this deck's going to top 25-30%. I don't think that. I just think that it's going to be hands down the best deck of the format. But anyway, guys, this is my ranking. Let me know down below what you guys think. Again, we do have our monthly giveaway, all that information in the links. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, take care.